Hello everybody, this is my entry for the Top 20 for 20 series that Joe the Horror Man and Jason from Horrific Nightmares have been doing. This theme is our Top 20 horror remakes. Before I begin with my list, I just want to say two introduction things. The first one is that this is by no means my opinion of the top 20 best horror remakes of all time. It's just my favourites. There will be some films on my list which are terrible films, but I happen to love them. And there will be other films not on this list which are fantastic films. But that's what's great about lists like this. You know, we all like different things, and it's all about just seeing what other people like. So this is my personal favourites list. The second thing I want to say is I had to think for a while about what to include on this, because I wasn't always sure on what qualifies as a remake. I'm a huge fan of Italian horror, and as any fan of 80s Italian horror will know, there is a pretty fine line between a remake and a rip-off. Think of Bruno Mattei's career, for example. One of my favourite Italian films of all time is The Night Train Murders, which is very obviously a kind of a remake or rip-off of Wes Craven's Last House on the Left, but I haven't included it or any films like that in this list because they weren't presented as remakes at the time, even though they are so obviously meant to be copies of those films. They're not really remakes, are they? They're just rip-offs, so that's not there. I also haven't included films which are technically remakes, but because they are full-length versions of a director's previous short film. I'm thinking here of the film Lights Out, which is a film I love, and it's included on Wikipedia's page for horror remakes. But I personally don't think that quite qualifies as a remake, because it's really what's happened there is the director made a short film to generate some cash for the film he really wanted to make. So these are just inarguably horror remakes that I've got here. So let's get on with it. Number 20 is the Child's Play remake, a flawed film. I think that they didn't make the best use of the idea that this doll is connected to all the technology in the house, but it does a really good job of reimagining this story, and I like it a lot. So Child's Play at number 20. My next pick for number 19 is one of the most hated films, remakes anyway, When a Stranger Calls. This is what they've done here is they've taken the first 20 minutes of the original film, that very famous 20 minutes, and they've stretched it out to the length of a full film. And for a lot of people that doesn't work, but for me it does. I love the setting, I love the slow burn aspect of it. Fair enough, there's no mystery to this film, there's no tension about who the killer is. And that is a flaw of the film, I accept that. But for what it does, I really happen to like it. So When a Stranger Calls in at number 19. 18 is the I Spit on Your Grave remake. I have a bit of an odd history with these films. The first time I saw the original, I was with Siskel and Ebert on that one. I despised it. I even came very close to throwing it away because I didn't want it in the house. I thought it was artistically worthless. It had no merit to it whatsoever. Some years later, I rewatched it and I realized that even though I still find it a repulsive film, it certainly has artistic merit. I can't criticize a horror film for being genuinely horrifying, which that film is. This remake massively tones down the horror of it, especially with the sexual violence aspect, but it still keeps the brutality of the original film, and I think Sarah Butler does a very good job with a very difficult role. So I Spit on Your Grave there, in at number 18. Number 17 is an absolutely dreadful film, which I adore. It's called Unhinged. It's a remake of a 1982 film. Oh, so much about this film is just bad and wrong. The acting is atrocious. The direction is amateurish. It is a proper production. It's not ultra low budget filmmaking. In fact, this is released by 88 Films. Not that that proves anything actually, because they do release some crap sometimes, but this is really poorly written and acted, but there's just something about it which is so charming to me. I love the story, I love the overacting by the villain, I love the 3 English girls and 1 Australian desperately trying to do American accents and then pretty much just abandoning them halfway through the film. It's just an enjoyable film, so you may not have seen it or even heard of it, excuse me, but if not, check it out if you like films that are enjoyably terrible. That's that one. Next up is a film which I very rarely hear anyone talk about. It's called The Echo. It's a remake of a Filipino film. What I like about this, it's the same director who remade his own film. I wish that would happen more often. I wish that when America decides to remake foreign films, give the budget to the original director and see what he can do with more money. Because, as shown here, the results can be great. This is a very simple film. Like most Asian horror, it has a message, and the message is a good one, or at least it's one that I happen to like. Simple, but it's one that needs saying as often as possible about not turning your back on injustice when you see it and doing what you can to make the world a slightly better place. It's got a nice creepy feel to it, good atmosphere. Yeah, really good film. A minor gem that I just don't hear anyone mention, so check it out. Next up is the Evil Dead remake. What I like about this is they took away all the humor and the comedy of the original and just made a straight horror film. I love the original Evil Dead very much more than this one, but they just made a straight up brutal visceral horror film with this one, and I think it's fantastic. So the Evil Dead. Next is one of my favorite fairly modern slasher films, Sorority Row, a fairly faithful remake of House on Sorority Row but with a modern twist. Excellent cast, good direction, good villain, just a good slasher. Simple but effective. Next up is the second of the Carrie remakes from 2013. Carrie was remade for a TV in 2002, I think, and that was also a really good remake with a very different kind of ending. Carrie survives in that one, sorry for the spoiler, but this one, though, is faithful to King's novel. Chloe Grace Moretz is fantastic in the title role. Julianne Moore, I'm not keen on her as an actress. I think she's massively overacts in almost everything she does. But if you're looking for someone to play Margaret White, the very histrionic character, she is the person to call, I guess, for that, because overacting, it goes with the territory. Excellent film, and I like very much that they included the role of social media in teenage bullying these days, because De Palma's original film is a classic, but I do think it's very dated in some ways, and so they have updated it to make it more relevant for our time. Next up is The Uninvited. This is a remake of Tale of Two Sisters, which is in my top 3 Asian horror films of all time. And I saw this film before I saw Tale of Two Sisters, so I didn't know anything about the story. I didn't see the twist coming. When it did come, I was blown away. Possibly for that reason, I think more highly of this film than perhaps I should. It's not that original because it's a remake. But I do think it's still really well done. It's well acted and very well directed. So The Uninvited. And number 11 is a King remake, which very rarely gets spoken about. It's the Salem's Lot remake with a great cast: Rob Lowe, Donald Sutherland, James Cromwell, Rutger Hauer. Stephen King is my favourite writer, and Salem's Lot is one of my favourite books by him, because I love King books where he depicts small-town America. He does it. He presents such a rich cast of characters when he does that, and because he's such a keen psychologist, he really gets into the minds of all the different personalities you find in a small town. In Toby Hooper's original Salem's Lot, which I love, he necessarily had to cut out a huge amount of King's book just to fit it in even to the 3-hour runtime. This film acts as a very nice, also 3-hour counterweight to Toby Hooper's film, because here we get to see other parts of King's book which weren't in that film. So you put them together, you kind of get the full book. So check it out. A lot of people haven't watched this, but check it out. And don't be put off by the opening scene, which is very weird. It almost made me turn it off because I thought, what on earth is this? This isn't Salem's Lot. But stick with it. Get through the opening scene and you'll realize why it's there and what they've done there. Really good, Salem's Lot. All right, into the top 10 is the Omen remake, which is somewhere in there. A lot of people don't like that remake because they think it's pointless. It is, but they did decide to remake it, and I don't think they could have done a better job than what they did. It's really well done. The Omen is one of my favourite films of all time, so I'm always happy to see a new take on that same story. It's very faithful to the story, very faithful to the original, and like I said, it's one of my favourite films, so I'm happy to see more of the story. Next is a guilty pleasure, House of Wax. Yeah, everything about this, from the very odd storyline right down to Paris Hilton's, I think she was going for erotic strip dance, is so enjoyable. It's just a good time, and It's by no means a classic of horror cinema, but I do think it's excellently made. The acting is good enough for what it needs to be, including from Paris Hilton. Just a fun time. House of Wax. Next up is a film which is one of the most hated of all time, Nightmare on Elm Street. I recently made a video explaining why I like this film and offering a defense for it, so I'll link to that in the description box below if you're interested to hear my further thoughts on it. But I make no apology for really liking this film. I think that a lot of the criticisms that I made of it are perfectly valid, but I also think a lot of the criticisms are very... Well, I can't say misplaced, because we like what we like, don't we? It's not my place to say that people are wrong in their dislike for something. But let me just say that there is a defense that can be offered for this film, and I think that I made that defense in the video. So go watch it if you care enough about it. Nightmare on Elm Street. Next up is the Friday the 13th remake. Yep, they did a great job with this. They squashed together the original parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it's a very enjoyable film. I wish they'd continued it. I don't understand what is the point of remaking all these franchise films if you're not going to go on to do the part 2, the part 3, the part 4. They all make huge amounts of money, so what's stopping you? Don't worry about the critical backlash. Who cares about that? The original films were trashed as well. What else? What does fans want to see with this? It's not huge budgets. We don't care about big name actors. Just stick to the original idea of these films. Just get a moderate budget, a competent cast, doesn't need to be any name actors, and keep the feel of the Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street world, or, you know, why did they just make them and then start making them? I don't get it. Only to then a few years later reboot them yet again with another original adaptation. But with that gripe out the way, the Friday the 13th remake is excellent. Next, Pet Sematary. A lot of people don't like this one, but I far prefer it to Mary Lambert's original. I'm not a fan of that film. I think it has some great scenes, but overall I just don't like her direction in that film. And what I like about this is the choice they made, as a spoiler coming up here, to reverse which kid died. They made it the older daughter, which allows for more competent acting, whereas in the original they kept King's idea of the toddler boy, which looks silly, to me anyway. And that's no comment at all on the actor. He's a kid. He's a toddler. You can't expect him to be able to act emotions like this. But it does come across as ridiculous to me. Whereas here, the girl has some acting chops, and it's a little bit more believable in a story about a kid coming back from the dead, if it can be believable. I love the atmosphere. I love John Lithgow's turn as Judd. Yeah, just really like that one. Next is another King. It's the It pair of films, which is all one film. I can't say I like this more than the 1990 miniseries, but that's only because I grew up with the 1990 miniseries. It's such an important part of my childhood and my horror cinema history. But this is a really excellent adaptation too. It's a different kind of thing. I don't know how I feel about them dividing it into all kids stuff and then mainly adult stuff. I think I probably would have liked it to be integrated like it was in the original, but that's a minor gripe. It does way more things right than I feel it did not so well. So that's it. And at number 4 is Rob Zombie's Halloween, which again, I'm putting the films together here because to me, this is all one film. For the same reason Tarantino's Kill Bill is one film. You can't fully understand and appreciate this film without this one, and vice versa. You certainly can't understand and appreciate Halloween 2 without this one. In my opinion, Rob Zombie's Halloween takes a look at violence, and Halloween 2 looks at the effects of violence on the survivors, all the different ways that violence can affect people. And I think that it's kind of a modern masterpiece. It's very important not to think of it as a remake of Carpenter's original. It's Zombie's own thing. But the first time I watched the original, I wasn't keen on it. That opening sequence with the Myers family really put me off, as I think it put off everyone. It's such a deeply unpleasant scene to have to sit through, of these awful people being awful to each other. But it's there for a reason, and if you stick with the whole thing through to the end, it makes sense, let me say. So Halloween, number 4, sorry. In at number 3 is the Let Me In, the remake of Let the Right One In. Bit of heresy coming up here. I actually prefer this to the original Swedish film. The original film is excellent, don't get me wrong. It is an absolutely fantastic minor masterpiece of modern horror. And I suppose it's a better film than this one, but I happen to prefer this one because, firstly, I really like Chloe Grace Moretz's acting. I think that this film corrected a couple of the plot holes or the implausibilities of the original. I'm not going to get into them because it's not the place for that. Maybe further down the line I will make a video explaining that better, but I think that this one makes for a more coherent film. And I also just like the aesthetic of this film a bit more. I know that what most people love about the original film is the aesthetic of that film, the very barren, wastelandy, but I was born in England, but I live now in the northwest of Russia, and let me tell you, that original film pretty much looks like where I live, so it's nothing new for me to see any of that. I think in the film, the people in the bar actually griping about the Soviets or something like that, if I remember correctly. Yeah, well, that rings very true for my daily life. So I just happen to prefer this one. I think it's an excellent film on its own right. So that's that. In at number 2, John Carpenter's The Thing. Nothing really to say about this one. It's a masterpiece. I think there's a case being made that this was Carpenter's creative peak. Halloween in 1978, The Fog in 1980, and then this one in 1982. I think that trilogy of films are his 3 masterpieces, and this is him at the top of his game in every single way. It's a masterpiece. There's nothing I can fault about it. It may be the best film on this list. The one coming up is my favorite, but if I had to nominate the best film on this list, it would be this one. So, The Thing. But my number 1 is David Cronenberg's The Fly. A flawless film to me. I love the dynamic between Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. I love the very claustrophobic setting and location, the attention to detail with Goldblum's characterization, his acting, the really quite oddly moving love story that develops between them, the practical effects, you know, rest in peace, practical effects soon, I think I'll be saying. Excellent film, fantastic idea, and I think probably Cronenberg's greatest film. So that's my top 20. Thanks for watching. It's gone on a while, hasn't it? 17 minutes. But anyway, if you did watch this far, thank you for doing that. And I really look forward to seeing everybody else's lists. So thank you again for watching. Take care, everybody. Thank you to Jason and Joe for doing this series. Even if I can't take part in all of the themes, I do love watching all of the entries that are put forth. So thanks for putting in the effort to do this, guys, for everybody. Take care, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.